quisimos probar algo diferente.
¿Este va a ser el primero en inglés
Sí.
o he hecho? ¡Wow!
Ajá, sí.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Del uno al otro no encuentro la esencia y el testigo no existe sin parcialidad.
Welcome.
Thank you.
This is kind of different for me. It's a new challenge.
Yeah,
But I think that's how we grow.
absolutely.
You know, putting ourselves in a uncomfortable situation.
Right.
Welcome to Dale Dale.
Thank you.
Liza Ortiz.
Sí. Yes.
Yeah. So many people know you as La Brava.
Yeah.
I want to get to know more about how you got to that point. You know, where you come
Absolutely.
from. Where were you born?
I was born in Gainesville, Florida.
And your
Yeah.
parents are from?
My dad's from Venezuela and my mom's from Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long do you stay in Florida for?
We moved around Florida quite a bit, I think until around 7 years old, which is when we left for Venezuela. But
Okay.
yeah.
You know, it's kind of cool how I'm having these conversations with many different people, but somehow there's a connecting point or something that I can identify with.
Mm-hmm.
I lived with my grandma until I was 7
Yeah.
in a city, Maracay,
Mm-hmm.
and then I moved with my mom at 7 years old when she bought her first home.
Yeah.
And I have different, I don't know, I call myself multicultural because I grew up until 7 in a city,
Right.
then to a bigger city until I was 17, and then I moved to the States.
Yeah.
So you lived there until 7,
Mhm.
and then you moved to Venezuela.
I did.
You remember that?
Yeah. Yes. You know, the funny thing is, my brother and I were homeschooled growing up. So we would travel to Venezuela all the time. When we would go to Puerto Rico, we'd go to a lot of different places. So the transition there was a little difficult, which reflecting on it seems surprising, right? Because I was familiar with it.
Yeah.
But I think I had gotten used to, at that point we were in West Palm Beach, Florida, and so moving somewhere else that was familiar to me but still completely different was a little jarring, but it was also so fun because we lived on a farm and I have a very big family. My dad's one of 13, so the last time I counted my cousins was 72. It's a lot.
72?
It's a lot of people.
On one side.
Mm-hmm. Because I have cousins that are way older, you know,
Okay.
that had kids at that point
Yeah.
that were my age, and so it's just generations and generations of people. So that was a lot of fun, especially, again, being homeschooled. You don't go to school and get to hang out with all these kids. The people that live around you are really the only friends you get to make. And so this was a lot of fun being with family and, again, out in nature just all the time.
How long did you live in Venezuela for?
It was only about a year or so,
Okay.
just because at that point is when the political climate started to
So
shift.
around 99, 98?
Yep,
Okay.
we moved back to Charlotte in 2000, so.
Okay.
Or to Charlotte. We had never been here. In 2000. So we weren't there that long.
Okay.
Because, I mean, my dad wanted to go back because he's a doctor in Venezuela. He didn't get his doctorate here, you know, and you have to do all this stuff to do that. But yeah, once the political climate shifted, there was a big storm that happened.
Oh yeah, in 99. Yeah, I got a friend that she went through that.
Yeah.
Like she lived the whole situation.
Yeah, it was
She
rough.
was rescued from a rooftop. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Every time she tells me about that story, it's like I get
Yeah.
chills. It's like, whoa. Yeah.
Yeah, we were there. Where we were wasn't affected like that, but definitely flying out, you could see that as we were going to the airport and everything else. Just like I remember, yeah, it was a crazy time. But
Yeah.
my dad had some friends here, also Venezuelans that had moved here. He didn't want to go back to Florida.
Okay.
So he came and he saw all the trees and said, this is it. So that's how we ended
nice.
up in Charlotte.
So growing up being homeschooled, it's completely different to going to a public school or private school. How was your day to day being homeschooled?
You know, I really liked homeschooling. There were things that I would definitely do differently, but the reason I loved homeschooling is because you learned to, at least the curriculum we were using, you learned to learn, not to memorize for a test.
Okay.
So I actually ended up being 2 years ahead of my grade, you know, just because it's all reading. And again, you're actually taking in the information and then you're done for the day by noon, you know. It's not that rigid schooling of traditional public school or even private school that sometimes can be really long hours, I feel like,
I
for a
talked to a
child.
friend who's a psychologist, and I asked her once, like, what's the right way to raise your kids?
Yeah.
And she said, there's no right way.
Right.
You know, there's so many different ways, and you choose what you think is better for you. I
Right.
got friends that they were raised as, you know, very disciplined, as if their parents were in the military, and you know, it works for different people.
Right.
But that I'm always amazed of, because I had the typical, you know, going to school,
Yeah.
you know, like you got to go to college, you got to do this. But then when I was 18, I kind of rebelled.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, that's not for me. In my situation at the time, I just had to go to work
Right.
and learn about life,
Right.
you know, kind of survival mode.
Yeah.
But then, so you come into Charlotte. Were you still homeschooled in Charlotte?
Yeah, I didn't start going to public school until the 8th grade. And
Okay.
so there was still a good chunk of time here that I was homeschooled. Claudio went to school for the first time in high school.
Yeah.
So there was about a year or so that I had to be by myself, and that was no fun.
Were you excited about going to like regular school, having that experience?
Yeah, it was, honestly, it's funny, we had very different experiences. For me, 8th grade was the best year ever, because the thing about being homeschooled and playing with the kids that are around you is that at that point there isn't this weird social, you know, like kids, I think, are inherently kind and want to build community. This social structure that they create in schools doesn't exist once they come home. At least that's what I perceived growing up. And so when I went to the 8th grade, I had no idea there were cliques of people, right? Like these kids hung out with these kids and these were others, and they had their little groups. That was completely foreign to me.
Yeah.
So I came to school with my I will never forget, my SpongeBob t-shirt and jorts that I cut up myself. And again, I think our parents homeschooled us because they were nervous about the school system, having migrated here, because they moved here only, I think, a little less than a year before I was born, something like that, because Claudio was born in Puerto Rico. And so they just weren't familiar with the school system here and didn't really trust it.
Yeah, they were still adapting to it, you know? Okay.
But they never discouraged us from meeting other people. And so I get to school with my SpongeBob shirt and my jorts, and I was like, you want to be my friend? You want to be friends?
Yeah.
You know? And I had 5 good friends, and that felt like so many to me because I had never been in an environment like that. And they didn't put me in the grade that I was technically in because they wanted the transition to be easier for me. So the first 2 years of public school were so easy because I already knew most of what was being taught. And so I just got to hang out and figure that part out.
And then you did like regular high school as well.
Yeah.
Okay. When does the music start? Like the love for music?
Yeah, always. I
Always?
mean, my mom, she grew up in a church family. You know, my grandpa was a pastor.
Okay.
And so her siblings were all just always singing, and they taught themselves how to play guitar. She particularly played mandolin as well. So ever since I can remember, we were always singing together. She bought us a little guitar for kids, you know. So music was important to her, and she passed that down to us. And so when I got to high school, I took choir. to be very honest with you, I have never naturally been the person that wants to show that to people,
Okay.
you know?
I
I
can
liked
relate.
being in a group.
Yeah, okay.
So even at home, you would never, I think even now, find me playing guitar and singing in front of my family. I was going to be in my room or the furthest room in the house where no one could hear me,
Okay.
or when they were gone. So that's always been an odd thing, but I'm not particularly fond of like, hey.
So you don't
my
like to
music.
show off your talent in a
Right.
way.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think, you know, very talented people, sometimes that goes to waste
Yeah.
because they don't share it with the world.
Yeah.
And, you know, but you gotta have the courage.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have it, but someone else is gonna have it, or is gonna show, yeah, you can do it.
Yeah.
They're gonna give you that support. And it's like, come on, let's do
Which
it.
for me was Claudio. I'm
Okay.
only where I am now because musically because of Claudio.
Part of it.
Yes.
Because,
yes.
I mean, I would say 50.
right.
Let's say 50-50, you know? Because
Yeah.
he probably gave you that push,
Yeah.
but also your talent and discipline, you know, practicing.
Yeah.
That's all yours.
Yeah.
When was your first performance?
Actually, in high school. I don't know how I got the courage to do this.
Okay.
But I was in an a cappella group.
Mm-hmm.
And we were performing at the talent show. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to also perform
Okay.
my own song.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first song I ever wrote. Very terrible. But I got third place.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, that was very out of my norm. I don't know what inspired me to do that, but that's the first time I ever performed by myself, but also performing again with choir with the a cappella group.
I think as an artist, you have this hunger or this drive to show, to express something that you have very deep inside.
Yeah.
And that's maybe where it came from.
Yeah.
You know, having that desire of, you know, this is something cool. I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
And let's show it. Let's perform. It makes you feel good.
Right.
I mean, you could be like super nervous, but let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. So you did your first performance in high school. You finished high school. What's next?
I'm in college, and Claudio, again, Claudio had been in different bands at that point, started exploring musically. I had not, you know, after high school, it was just kind of put on the back burner. And he invited me to start playing with one of the bands he was starting called Members of the Sea. There were so many. I think there were 7 of us. It was a lot of people. But that was my first band, and that was the first time I started exploring performing in Charlotte. And still one of my favorite projects. I really
Are you
loved it.
still doing it, or?
That band? No.
Okay.
No. That was too many people. That is a logistical nightmare a little
Yes.
bit to have so many folks, as much as they were all
Yeah.
so amazing. Loved making music with each one of them.
Yeah.
And that's why that project was special. It really is, especially in college years, you know, people start to grow and move out, or
Yeah.
in terms of moving on with relationships, whatever the case may be. Claudio went into the army, you know, and we had to start performing without him, and that was strange. But, you know, just life happens, and so that unraveled fairly quickly after that. I don't know how long we were a band, but it wasn't super long.
When does La Brava come in?
La Brava didn't actually happen till 2022. So,
Okay.
yeah, fairly recent.
Okay.
To get to there, it was, again, the same experience. Claudio started making music with somebody, and we formed Patabamba. And that also kind of devolved, and Claudio, the drummer, and I still wanted to make music. And that's when Claudio was like, you need to be the one that sings. Because in Patabamba, I didn't sing. I would do the background vocals, the harmonies. I think there was one song I did, but I wasn't the main singer by any means. I would just play the synth and, like I said, do background vocals. So when we were deciding what we wanted to do to form this new group, he was like, you need to be the one that sings. It's like, no. And that is when we made Chocala.
Uh-huh.
And again, life happens, and Chocala had to take a pause.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we moved to Bravo, Pueblo. And then from Claudio wanting to go to Puerto Rico, and things were changing, and sorry to jump all over the place.
No, it's all
the
good.
ADD. But I had done a few solo shows at that point. I didn't call it La Brava.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't that identity yet, because it just wasn't a constant thing. It was a lot of Goodyear Arts events that I got invited to do 3 songs or whatever it was. And so that was never its own project. There was never intention behind being its own project. So it wasn't until I saw the need that things were going to shift and I wanted to keep making music that La Brava became its own thing. And it wasn't until I had a show with Zeta, was my first like big one. I wrote most of those songs 2 nights before the show. It was very crazy. But that is what made La Brava. So I would say 2022 is where that really picked up, and that I
want to put a highlight on this, and it's what I mentioned, having that pressure, being in survival mode. It makes you discover what you're capable of. And to write a bunch of songs in 2 nights or 2 nights before, it takes a lot, you know. But you gotta have that pressure, that responsibility. You know, being held accountable. Like, hey, you're gonna play, and you want to give your best. You know, you don't want to be mediocre and just like, oh no, just whatever. And I've seen that a lot happening in the art scene in Charlotte, that people don't take it seriously because, oh, Charlotte's a small town. No, you gotta give your best. You gotta represent your community. You gotta represent the city. It doesn't matter, like, let's do the best you can, you know. And then one day we're gonna be on the level of New York City or Miami, whatever, but don't limit yourself. So Bravo Pueblo happened before La Brava.
So technically that name, La Brava, came before Bravo Pueblo. For one of the Goodyear events. But it was never, again, meant to be something that continuously existed. I got invited to do Highlights Fest, and everybody had a name and stuff. And I was like, I kind of want to have something that isn't just Liza Ortiz. And I had written Mujer Brava for that particular show. And so from that song is where I took out La Brava. And that came before Bravo Pueblo was formed, because we were just Los Ortiz when Claudio and I started playing together. And then once Lee came into the band, that's when we went with Bravo Pueblo instead. But so technically La Brava existed first, but it wasn't ever, like I said, meant to be its own thing that I was going to continue doing.
There's something that I've noticed happening with Spanish music, or music in Spanish, you know. Back in 2005, 2006, I was in a band. Where all the lyrics were in Spanish. It was very rare to see an English speaker, you know, at the shows. Little by little, they would enjoy the show because of the energy, the performance. They wouldn't know what we were singing about, but they would enjoy it. But now, most people at your shows, they're Charlotte natives, or you know, people that don't speak Spanish. I mean, you grew up here. Your first language, it's English, right?
Well, I don't remember what I picked up first, because again, since we were homeschooled, we've always spoken Spanish at home. And especially with my dad, it's always weird how you make those relationships. So my dad is always in Spanish. With my mom, it can flip-flop. It just depends. So I don't remember which one I learned first. Clearly, I am more comfortable with English because I live here. I don't get as many opportunities to practice my Spanish as I would living somewhere that's the dominant language.
But all your lyrics, they're in Spanish. What made you choose Spanish to to play, you know, to write.
The imagery of it to me is so beautiful. And I actually am not a huge creative writer. I went to school for English, but it was for literature analysis, not because I like creative writing.
Okay.
So at the beginning, it was a little bit of a chore, you know, not as much of a labor of love. I would always get really frustrated and then just end up writing something I really loved. But the Spanish came from it, just the sounds of it, the imagery of it lends itself, for me, it's easier to be creative with that, you know, even if it's a little cheesy. One of my examples is a song I wrote in Patabamba, and now I can't remind me puzzle in Spanish, because you know how that happens.
Puzzle?
El rompecabezas.
Yeah.
So that was the song, which that in itself is an image, right? It's not just puzzle. It is not the physical thing. It's headbreaker, essentially. And so that's what I love about Spanish, is you can really create this beautiful play. You can create more imagery, I feel like, than the directness that is English.
Gotcha.
And I think there are amazing writers in English that get to do that in this language, but that is not my talent.
Gotcha. There's one thing that I always tell my wife. She was born in Jersey from Ecuadorian parents, but she moved back and forth from Ecuador to New Jersey and Charlotte. And I tell her she's a hybrid.
Yeah.
Because when she's here, she's an Ecuadorian friend. When she's in Ecuador, she's the American cousin.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that. I've been living here half of my life. And last time I went to Venezuela, I didn't feel like I fully belonged there.
Yeah.
I still have my roots there. There's some stuff that I miss a lot that I can't deny from growing up there. But then I'm like, Charlotte is home for me. How do you feel about being a hybrid? Do you feel that way?
Absolutely. I think that's also part of what I try to do with my music, and I'll get there. But I not only come from a household with different origins, right? But being homeschooled, like, there's just so many layers of, I don't want to call it niche, but just a mix of cultures and experiences and things that just make you a little bit different. And so there's never been anywhere that has felt like home. Charlotte is my home for sure, but it took me a while to get that comfort, you know? And I go to Puerto Rico, people know I'm not from there. I have an accent that is all over the place. And if I hang out with Puerto Ricans, I'm picking up that accent. If I'm hanging out with Venezuelans, I'm picking up that accent.
Gotcha.
So it's always been evident that I'm not from wherever I am, you know?
Do you ever struggle with, where do I belong?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like I said, my transition to school was really difficult after that first year, because you do learn that there are these cliques, and and it's only in school, right? We eventually, thankfully, somewhat grow out of that. But I didn't have the easiest time. I think I was one of maybe 3 in my grade of 900 kids that were Latinos, and that alone, you know, is an odd thing to feel at home on top of the homeschooling part, you know. And again, I think the Latino community has shifted here, and you get a lot more diversity where people are from, but it hasn't always been that way, and that's okay too. But the point is, like, there was never a group or people or anything that was like, oh yeah, we founded this together, you know, like this feels home. So yeah, I think my music has been a reflection of that as well, and is what I try. It's definitely a feeling I try to convey, because part of it is a journey for myself in becoming more comfortable, and my hope is always that translates. And I've seen that happen, and that's the most exciting part for me. I want my music to be for everybody, you know. I'm not trying to be selective, but my favorite moment is when folks just like me are children of people that migrated or have these roots feel comfortable or feel inspired because it's different and because it feels more free, you know? Because that's the other thing is we make music that's a little bit, I don't want to say different as if we're inventing this new genre, you know? I don't think there's much creatively that's brand new, but it doesn't have as much restriction. If I like the way it sounds or however it is, I'm going to go with that, whether that falls into like a pop or rock, what regardless of genre. And so, yeah, it's just that freedom that I hope creates a sense of belonging, and I've seen that sense of excitement in people, and that's the most rewarding for me.
In a way, I think you're a pathfinder.
Yeah.
You are, because you're pretty much, now you're finding people just like you that you can identify with.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, like you said, you're playing that music for them, and you make them feel, you know, that's cool. Like, I dig it.
Yeah.
You know, let's enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. And like I said, at first you are like, oh, I'm different. You know, I want to belong to this group. I'm not accepted. But you know what? Being different makes you who you are. And it's like, to me, I mean, one thing that I struggled with a lot was I didn't want to have an accent in English.
Yeah.
But I have to accept it. Hey, I'm bilingual, you know? So, fuck the accent.
Right.
I'm bilingual.
Yeah.
Let's, you know, and that's how it is, you know? And it's beautiful. But it takes time. I've had a lot of friends that they want to belong somewhere that they're not, but they're pushing and pushing. And then until they're 21, 22, it's like, you know what? I'm Latino, but I'm American too, and that's cool. It's who I am. Let's just be, and that's it. You know?
Yeah.
Bravo Pueblo.
Yeah.
When is it coming out?
Hopefully in March. At least one.
You gotta ask
March.
Lee how many times I've been asking.
I know, and we want it so bad, but I really do think March 9th on the down low.
Okay,
We'll
okay.
have
Cool.
at least one out. It's just it's a process, right? And I know a lot of people record really quickly. For us, it's just been layers. Like the recording, we got it done. Then it's getting in the studio and fine tuning things. And then it's like the logistical part of things. And I think that's why this band has been so wonderful, is because as much as we have goals or want to do certain things, we are still so open with one another in terms of life comes first.
Okay.
You know, surviving comes first. And that doesn't mean we're going to put this to the side, but when we do need to, that's okay. You know, we have the ability to just pick it up when we want to, when it feels good, instead of it having to be. I mean, I think if you asked the three of us if we could just quit everything else and dedicate ourselves to music and the band or whatever else, 100%. But the reality of life is that that's not always an option. And I've been in different musical situations where that can create a place of friction when people's goals don't align, when people's dedication, whatever else. And so it has taken us a long time, but it's going to come out, and we are so proud of it, you know, and that feels good.
And you guys are working with Jesse Klassen, right?
Yeah.
How's that going?
So great. So great. I think he understands what we're trying to do. And another part of all of this that I think also makes it work so well, even with Jesse, we can all be very transparent. Nobody's going to get their feelings hurt if he suggests something and it doesn't work, or we suggest something and it doesn't jive with the rest of the group. And there's always going to be a level of compromise, but I do love that we can have that sense of transparency without it feeling like a personal attack, you know? So it's been wonderful.
I
Really
can't wait.
wonderful.
I can't wait for it to
Yeah.
come out. I mean, the intro song is
Yeah.
Bravo Pueblo, and I thank you guys for letting me use that song
Yeah.
for the show, and I think it represents what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I really support you guys, and yes, please
Thank you.
release it.
Yeah, soon.
Yeah.
And hopefully after we do that, I'd like to start working on, because as much as La Brava is its own thing now, I think it also is an in-between space with Bravo Pueblo. So there are songs that I do as La Brava that we've taken on as Bravo Pueblo.
Okay.
And I love that because Claudio and Lee bring a whole nother layer and their own flavor that I didn't imagine, and it just makes the song that much better. So I'm always for that to happen, you know, and if we take it on as Bravo Pueblo, that's completely fine. But once we've decided what those songs are, I would like to start recording my own La Brava stuff
Okay.
as well.
And
And there is actually a song going to come out this year
Okay.
because I am working with Bear and Dance for a show they're doing this year called Homegrown with different artists of Charlotte. And so I had to record a song. So it has to come out this year.
Okay.
So 2 songs. That's great. You know, hopefully more with Bravo Pueblo down the road. But yeah.
One last question. Every time I see you play, you're smiling.
Yeah.
Are you always as happy?
No.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm actually somebody that has been fighting depressions for as long as I can remember. So I am just a complex human like everybody else. I think my core is joy, and every experience I've had reminds me of that constantly, you know, but my anxiety is pretty high, and I don't think, without having to go too far on a tangent, I think in this environment, in this society, there's not a lot that promotes us feeling joyful or peaceful or anything else. It feels like quite the opposite. And for me, that's really hard, right? And so lots of anxiety, whatever else. But at the end of the day, music brings me joy. You know, community brings me joy. And in those moments, I am living that, and that's honestly what cures the nerves too. I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't talk much at shows because that's a nerve-wracking side, right? I don't mind having conversations with people, but that one-sided conversation from the stage is a little daunting. But I just get lost in my joy and the love that I have for what's happening, the appreciation that people would even come to share that with me. So that is why I always have a big smile. And for the most part, again, I am a joyful person, so there's a lot of smiling, but I am one of those people that experiences both things very intensely. You know, when I am sad, I am very sad, and it's very low, but the highs are also equally very
That's
lovely.
balance.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's life.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your
Absolutely.
time, for being here, and sharing your experiences in life. You know, and thank you for making amazing music.
Thank you.
You know, for those performances, and I can really see that you enjoy doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. This is Dale Dale Podcast. And bye.